Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main story. Emily Jackson stood at the entrance of the shelter, the heavy rain outside soaking the brim of her coat and clinging to the edges of her hood. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead, casting long shadows along the rows of metal tables where volunteers and guests moved in quiet rhythm. She adjusted the straps of her worn backpack, glancing down at the donation receipts she had organized just moments before, her fingers trembling slightly from the chill in the air. It was her first evening leading the dinner service on her own, and despite her confidence in past volunteer work, a knot of anxiety coiled tightly in her stomach. She inhaled slowly, letting the scent of warm soup and bread fill her senses, grounding herself in the moment, reminding herself why she had chosen to help here. As she moved down the line distributing meals, her eyes caught a man in his mid-30s sitting alone at the far end of the hall. His clothes were unremarkable, a simple navy jacket and jeans, but his posture was precise, his shoulders squared, and the subtle way he observed the room suggested he was someone accustomed to control and attention. Emily hesitated for a heartbeat, noticing the faint crease of worry on his forehead, the way his hands clasped the edge of the table. Compassion surged through her, and without thinking, she walked toward him, offering the first plate of soup with a warm, deliberate smile. "Here you go, sir," she said gently, meeting his gaze for the briefest moment. The man looked up, surprise flashing across his features as though he had not expected anyone to notice him at all. He nodded, muttering a quiet, almost shy, "Thank you." Emily moved back to her station, heart still racing, feeling the familiar tug of uncertainty and purpose mingling inside her. She adjusted the ladle in her hand and continued serving the guests, but her attention kept drifting back to the lone man. Something about the quiet dignity in his demeanor, the way he seemed so out of place yet perfectly composed, made her pause. This was no ordinary volunteer night, and she sensed, though she could not yet name it, that her simple act of kindness had already set into motion a series of events that would change both their lives. As she refilled the soup containers, the man rose slowly, approaching her with careful, deliberate steps, his eyes locking onto hers. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm yet carrying a weight that made her heart tighten. "I have a proposal for you. It is unusual, but I think you may be interested." Emily swallowed hard, glancing around the hall filled with murmuring guests, and nodded, curiosity overcoming caution. "I am listening," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her chest. The man extended a neatly folded folder toward her, the glossy cover catching the harsh overhead light, and she realized that whatever she was about to hear would pull her into a world far beyond the walls of this modest shelter, a world of structured events, formal appearances, and hidden intentions. "I am David Carter," he continued, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I run a foundation dedicated to helping communities like this one, but I believe there is an opportunity for you to lead one of our key projects. It will require commitment, discretion, and collaboration, but I think you are exactly the person for the role." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she took the folder, her fingers brushing against the smooth paper. Every instinct screamed caution, yet a flicker of excitement ignited within her. This was her chance to make a real difference, to step into a place of responsibility and trust, and she felt, deep in the pit of her stomach, that accepting this proposal would mark the beginning of a story far larger than she had ever imagined for herself. Emily Jackson sat at the small table in the corner of the shelter office, her fingers still holding the folder David Carter had handed her moments ago. The hum of the fluorescent lights above filled the room as rain tapped steadily against the windows, creating a rhythm that matched the rapid beating of her heart. She unfolded the papers carefully, scanning the text that outlined expectations, schedules, and the list of community outreach programs she was to oversee. Each bullet point seemed to grow heavier in significance as she realized the level of responsibility now resting in her hands. She took a deep breath and looked around the room at the volunteers and guests, their faces a mixture of tiredness, hope, and gratitude. It was the first time she had truly considered the impact she could make, not just on the shelter but on the lives of every person who passed through these doors. David leaned against the doorframe, observing her silently, giving her the space to process, but his presence carried a subtle pressure, a reminder that this was no ordinary opportunity. Emily finally met his gaze and saw a seriousness that was unshakable, tempered with the faintest hint of encouragement. She nodded slowly, her voice quiet but resolute. "I will do it," she said, and even as the words left her mouth, a mix of fear and exhilaration surged through her. David stepped fully into the room, closing the gap, and extended his hand in a firm, professional gesture. "Excellent," he said. "The first step is familiarizing yourself with the daily operations here. You will shadow our senior coordinators, observe interactions, and begin to lead small tasks gradually. Discretion is key. You must act as though you have always been part of our organization, but remember, your role carries responsibilities that will extend beyond what is written in this folder." Emily nodded, absorbing every detail, her mind racing with the practicalities of her new position. She thought of the guests, many of whom struggled daily, relying on the structure and support this shelter provided. The weight of the decision settled on her shoulders, but rather than discouraging her, it sparked determination. Over the next few hours, she walked through the hallways alongside Karen, a senior volunteer with decades of experience. Emily observed every interaction, noting the way Karen addressed concerns with calm authority, how she balanced compassion with order, and how even small gestures, a kind word or an attentive glance, could ripple through the atmosphere of the shelter. When she was finally given a chance to lead a task herself, distributing meals to a line of guests waiting patiently, Emily felt her nerves tighten but took a deep breath and moved forward with confidence. David watched from a distance, his eyes tracking her movements carefully, evaluating her capacity to manage, to inspire, and to connect with those around her. At one point, a guest raised a question about dietary restrictions that Emily had not anticipated. She paused, then smiled warmly and asked them to follow her to the side, ensuring their needs were met. The guest nodded, clearly impressed by her responsiveness. It was a small victory, but one that solidified her understanding that leadership was not about authority alone, but about empathy, adaptability, and decisiveness. As the evening wore on, Emily felt a sense of rhythm and control settle in, the initial panic and hesitation replaced by a cautious confidence. David approached her once more, his expression unreadable but attentive. "You handled that exceptionally well," he said. "There will be challenges ahead, situations that require more than preparation and knowledge. You must trust your instincts, but never underestimate the importance of patience and listening. The people here respond to both, and your ability to balance these elements will determine the success of your involvement." Emily exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in, realizing that this was more than just a task or a role. It was a chance to prove her capability, to contribute meaningfully, and to learn from a man who had carefully orchestrated this environment to test not only her skill but her character. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, and the soft glow of the shelter lights created a sense of warmth amidst the dampness and chill. Emily looked up at David, meeting his steady gaze, and felt a quiet resolve forming within her. This was the beginning of something transformative, and though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with pressure, she was ready to step into the challenge, embracing both the responsibility and the opportunity with a newfound clarity. The following morning, Emily Jackson arrived at the shelter before sunrise, the pale light filtering through the rain-specked windows casting long, muted shadows across the tables and chairs. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm bread, mingling with the earthy aroma of the wet city streets that had blown in through the slightly ajar front door. She carried the folder David Carter had given her, reviewing the notes she had scribbled the night before, mentally rehearsing each task and anticipating potential challenges. As she entered the main hall, a few early volunteers were already moving quietly, setting up for the breakfast service. The rhythm of the shelter began to take shape around her, and Emily felt a mixture of determination and nervous energy tightening in her chest. David arrived moments later, his presence calm yet commanding, as if he were the axis around which the entire shelter rotated. He wore a simple gray coat over a crisp white shirt, jeans, and polished brown shoes, blending ordinary appearance with an air of meticulous control that made it impossible to ignore his authority. Emily approached him, careful to maintain professionalism, and he offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement before moving to observe the operations from a distance. The first task she was assigned involved coordinating the breakfast line, ensuring that each guest received the appropriate meal while also monitoring any special dietary needs. As she guided guests with a steady voice, answering questions and providing gentle reassurance, she noticed the subtle ways in which David was evaluating her. His gaze lingered on her posture, the tone of her voice, and the interactions she had with the volunteers and guests alike. A moment arose when a guest expressed concern about a food allergy, and Emily responded swiftly, calmly leading the individual to a separate serving station with alternative options while explaining each step. The guest nodded appreciatively, clearly reassured, and Emily felt a small surge of confidence, realizing that her actions had a tangible impact. Between serving duties, David approached her with a measured smile, his voice calm yet carrying weight. "You are adapting well," he said. "Remember that leadership here is not just about efficiency, but also about presence, about the ability to understand unspoken needs and to respond with care. Every small decision you make affects the flow and the atmosphere of this place." Emily nodded, absorbing the guidance, understanding that the nuances of empathy and attentiveness were as important as organizational skill. Later, she was asked to lead a small team of volunteers in distributing hygiene kits to guests, each kit containing items carefully selected to meet individual needs. She coordinated the group with quiet authority, checking each package, confirming items, and explaining their use to guests who had never interacted with such materials before. Her confidence grew with every interaction, and she began to notice subtle shifts in the mood of the room. Smiles returned, conversations carried more warmth, and a sense of mutual respect developed between the volunteers and those they served. As the morning progressed, Emily found herself balancing multiple responsibilities simultaneously, answering questions, directing traffic flow, observing guest interactions, and maintaining a calm demeanor under pressure. David continued to observe from a distance, occasionally offering a word of advice or a nod of encouragement, never intruding but making his presence felt. By the end of the breakfast service, the hall had transformed into a quieter, more orderly space, the volunteers and guests settling into a rhythm that Emily had helped orchestrate. She finally exhaled, feeling the weight of the morning lift slightly as she glanced toward David. His expression was unreadable but thoughtful, and he stepped closer, folding his hands in front of him. "Emily," he said, "you have demonstrated remarkable composure, empathy, and decisiveness today. These qualities are essential, not only for this project, but for the trust and responsibility that will be placed in your hands as you move forward. The foundation you are building here is as much about relationships as it is about operations, and I believe you are capable of leading both with integrity." Emily felt a swell of pride and determination, the nervous apprehension from yesterday replaced by a steady resolve. She understood that this was the beginning of a journey that would challenge her, push her boundaries, and ultimately transform both her life and the lives of those she served. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective, a quiet reminder that the world continued beyond these walls, waiting for her to make her mark. By mid-afternoon, the shelter had settled into a steady rhythm, the chatter of guests and volunteers forming a gentle undercurrent beneath the clinking of dishes and the soft rustle of coats and bags. Emily Jackson moved through the space with growing confidence, checking in with her team of volunteers, adjusting stations, and offering guidance wherever it was needed. David Carter remained nearby, observing discreetly from the side, his expression neutral but attentive, allowing Emily to take full ownership of the operations. A new challenge arose when a group of guests arrived unexpectedly, including a few families with young children who required careful attention and additional resources. Emily quickly assessed the situation, directing volunteers to prepare extra meals and ensuring that the children had blankets and warm drinks. Her voice carried calm authority, and she spoke with clarity that commanded attention without ever seeming harsh or unkind. David watched her interact with the families, noting the way she balanced efficiency with empathy, handling questions about allergies, special dietary needs, and seating arrangements with the precision of someone far more experienced than her tenure suggested. A moment came when one mother asked for assistance in managing her toddler while she filled out a registration form. Emily knelt down to eye level with the child, offering a warm smile and a gentle hand to guide him to a small table with toys and coloring supplies, while discreetly signaling a volunteer to help the mother. The mother nodded gratefully, relief evident on her face, and Emily felt the subtle thrill of making a meaningful difference. As the afternoon progressed, David approached Emily, his footsteps quiet on the polished linoleum floor. "You are handling unforeseen situations remarkably well," he said, his voice measured but carrying an undercurrent of encouragement. "It is one thing to manage routine operations, but the true test of leadership is adaptability and the ability to make quick, informed decisions that maintain both order and compassion." Emily exhaled, her heart still racing from the continuous flow of tasks, and nodded. "I understand. I will continue to monitor the flow and ensure that each guest feels cared for while keeping our operations smooth," she replied. David smiled faintly, a rare expression that softened his usually composed demeanor. "This is exactly the approach we need. Your ability to observe, adapt, and act with empathy is already setting a standard for others in this environment." A new challenge arrived as a delivery of supplies was delayed, leaving some of the tables temporarily without critical items. Emily quickly rallied a small team of volunteers to reorganize the available resources, improvising temporary stations and adjusting the distribution schedule. Her calm, decisive instructions ensured that no guest went without, and the disruption passed with minimal impact. Observing her, David realized that she had internalized the foundation's expectations far faster than anticipated, demonstrating both resilience and strategic thinking. As the last of the afternoon guests were served and the hall began to quiet, Emily took a moment to survey the room, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with exhaustion. David approached once more, his presence now less formal and more approachable, carrying a folder with notes on upcoming community events. "Emily, your performance today has been exemplary," he said, placing the folder gently on the table in front of her. "Tomorrow will bring additional responsibilities, including coordinating with external partners and overseeing fundraising events. I have every confidence that you will handle these tasks with the same dedication and skill you demonstrated today." Emily felt a swell of pride, her initial apprehension replaced with a growing sense of purpose. She understood that this role was not simply about managing a shelter or distributing resources, but about building trust, connecting with people on a fundamental level, and embodying the values the foundation upheld. As the sun began to dip behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across the polished floors, Emily glanced at David and saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes, confirming that she was not only capable of meeting expectations but was beginning to thrive in a role that would challenge her every skill and stretch the limits of her empathy and leadership. The next morning, Emily Jackson arrived at the shelter with a sense of anticipation, the sky over New York a muted gray, the chill of early spring still lingering in the air. Inside, the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the warmth of simmering soup, and the volunteers were already bustling quietly, preparing for the day ahead. Emily carried the folder David Carter had entrusted to her, filled with schedules, notes, and the plans for an upcoming fundraising event that would require her to coordinate multiple teams simultaneously. She took a deep breath, adjusting the straps of her bag and running a hand through her hair, reminding herself that each challenge was an opportunity to grow. David entered shortly thereafter, his presence steady, composed, and quietly commanding attention despite his understated attire of a crisp white shirt, tailored navy jacket, and dark jeans. He offered Emily a subtle nod as he moved to observe the morning operations, allowing her to take the lead while remaining available to provide guidance if necessary. The first test of the day arrived in the form of an unexpected influx of guests, including several families and elderly individuals who required extra care and attention. Emily immediately assessed the situation, delegating tasks to volunteers, setting up additional tables, and ensuring that meals were prepared to accommodate dietary restrictions. Her voice carried calm authority as she provided clear instructions and reassured the guests, making each feel acknowledged and valued. David observed her interactions closely, noting the precision with which she balanced efficiency and empathy, how she anticipated needs before they arose, and how she navigated the complexities of a busy shelter with a demeanor that inspired confidence in both volunteers and guests alike. At one point, a young boy approached Emily, holding a tattered toy and looking uncertain. She knelt to his level, offering a gentle smile and speaking softly to put him at ease, guiding him toward a small corner of the hall set up with books and art supplies. The boy's face brightened, and Emily felt a quiet satisfaction, recognizing that leadership was measured not only in tasks completed but in the impact on individual lives. Later, a shipment of supplies arrived, delayed due to traffic, presenting a logistical challenge. Emily swiftly organized volunteers to unload, sort, and distribute the items efficiently, maintaining order while ensuring that no guest was left waiting. David stepped forward briefly, providing encouragement and subtle suggestions, but allowed Emily to direct the operation fully, reinforcing her autonomy and building her confidence. As the afternoon progressed, Emily was tasked with coordinating a small fundraising planning session with community partners, a responsibility that required both poise and strategic thinking. She navigated introductions, outlined objectives, and facilitated discussion, drawing upon the skills she had honed over the previous days. David watched from the edge of the room, his expression a mix of appraisal and quiet approval, noting how Emily commanded respect and attention without resorting to force or intimidation. By the end of the day, the shelter had returned to a calm rhythm, guests satisfied, volunteers organized, and Emily feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. She met David's gaze as he approached, and he spoke with measured warmth. "You have demonstrated not only competence but a natural aptitude for leadership. Your ability to manage operations, anticipate challenges, and connect with people on a meaningful level is remarkable. The foundation you are helping to build here is strengthened by your presence, and I have every confidence that you will continue to excel as you take on greater responsibilities." Emily exhaled, a wave of pride and determination washing over her. She understood that her role extended beyond tasks and schedules. It was about building trust, inspiring others, and creating an environment where compassion and efficiency could coexist. Outside, the city glimmered faintly as the sun broke through the clouds, reflecting off wet streets and signaling a new beginning. Emily looked at David and saw in his expression a subtle approval that spoke volumes, confirming that she had not only met but exceeded the expectations placed before her, setting the stage for a journey that would challenge her skills, test her empathy, and ultimately transform both her life and the lives of those she served. That evening, as the shelter grew quiet and the last of the volunteers departed, Emily Jackson remained behind, methodically tidying the tables, organizing leftover supplies, and reviewing the notes David Carter had given her earlier in the week. The golden glow of the overhead lights cast long, soft shadows across the floor, creating a sense of warmth that contrasted sharply with the cool breeze slipping in through the partially opened windows. Emily paused for a moment, leaning against the edge of a table, her mind still buzzing from the intensity of the day. She reflected on the interactions she had navigated, the challenges she had faced, and the subtle yet critical decisions she had made that allowed the shelter to operate smoothly even under unexpected strain. A quiet footstep drew her attention, and she turned to see David approaching, his presence calm and deliberate, the dark navy jacket he wore perfectly tailored, his shirt crisp, and his expression carrying the familiar mix of assessment and quiet approval. He extended a small envelope toward her, his voice measured but warm. "Emily, I wanted to provide some feedback on your performance today and outline a few additional responsibilities that will begin tomorrow. Your ability to handle unanticipated situations while maintaining empathy and composure is exactly what we need in leadership roles within the foundation." Emily accepted the envelope, feeling a flutter of anticipation. She opened it carefully, reading through the notes that detailed upcoming community events, fundraising initiatives, and partnerships with local organizations. Each line carried both opportunity and responsibility, and she recognized that she was gradually being entrusted with tasks that extended far beyond her initial volunteer role. David continued, his gaze steady as he spoke, "Tomorrow you will be leading a meeting with several external partners. They will look to you not only for guidance on project implementation but also for assurance that the foundation operates with both efficiency and heart. It is a test, but I have confidence in your capacity to navigate it successfully." Emily nodded, her chest tightening with a mixture of nerves and excitement. "I understand. I will prepare thoroughly and ensure that the meeting reflects the values and integrity of the foundation," she replied, her voice firm despite the underlying anxiety. David offered a faint smile and a subtle nod, then gestured toward the door. "I will leave you to finalize the preparations for tomorrow. Remember, leadership is as much about listening and observing as it is about directing and executing. Your instincts will guide you if you remain attentive to the people and the environment around you." As David stepped away, Emily turned her attention back to the room, taking a deep breath and running her hands over the neatly stacked supplies and organized paperwork. The shelter was quiet now, but in that stillness she felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders, accompanied by a sense of purpose that she had not felt in years. She reviewed her schedule once more, envisioning the meeting and the interactions she would have with the external partners, planning each step, anticipating questions, and preparing her responses. Every decision she had made today, every problem she had solved, had strengthened her confidence and sharpened her understanding of leadership. As she closed the last cabinet and flicked off the lights, leaving only the soft ambient glow from the hallway, Emily felt a profound sense of readiness. She knew the challenges of tomorrow would be significant, but for the first time, she trusted in her own ability to meet them head-on. Looking toward the entrance where David had disappeared moments before, she felt a subtle connection to his guidance and vision, a quiet acknowledgement that this journey was not only about service and efficiency but about building trust, demonstrating integrity, and growing into a role that would shape not just her future but the future of everyone whose lives she touched through this work. The following day, Emily Jackson arrived at the shelter with the sun barely peeking over the horizon, casting a soft, golden light through the large front windows. The hall was already humming with activity as volunteers prepared for the morning operations, moving efficiently between tables, organizing meals, and arranging seating for the expected influx of guests. Emily carried the notes and schedules David Carter had provided, reviewing them carefully as she walked toward the main office. Her steps were purposeful, her mind focused on the responsibilities that awaited her, but a flicker of apprehension lingered beneath her composure. David entered shortly thereafter, his presence calm yet commanding, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored navy jacket, his dark eyes scanning the room with an intensity that was both assessing and quietly approving. He approached Emily, offering a subtle nod of acknowledgement before speaking. Today, you will be leading a session with several of our external partners who have come to observe our operations and discuss potential collaborations. This is an important test of your leadership and communication skills. Emily took a deep breath, nodding firmly. I am ready, she said, though the rapid beating of her heart betrayed the nerves she felt inside. The morning proceeded with a series of briefings, each guest and partner introduced, and Emily guided the volunteers with clarity and authority, ensuring that each table, each interaction, and each task unfolded seamlessly. As the partners observed, questions arose about resource allocation, volunteer training, and program outcomes. Emily responded confidently, explaining procedures, outlining improvements, and demonstrating a clear understanding of both operational logistics and the human element of shelter management. David watched from a corner, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp, evaluating her ability to manage under pressure while maintaining empathy and composure. A sudden challenge emerged when a family expressed concern over dietary restrictions that had been overlooked in the morning preparations. Emily immediately took action, coordinating with the kitchen staff to prepare alternative meals, personally speaking with the family to reassure them, and adjusting the distribution schedule to accommodate the unexpected needs. The family smiled, visibly relieved, and Emily felt a surge of quiet satisfaction, recognizing that her decisiveness and attention to detail had a tangible impact on the well-being of those in her care. As the session drew to a close, the external partners offered words of appreciation for the professionalism and dedication they had observed. David approached Emily, his expression unreadable for a moment before softening into a subtle smile. You have handled today exceptionally well, he said. Leadership is not solely about efficiency or knowledge, it is about presence, empathy, and the ability to make swift, thoughtful decisions under pressure. You demonstrated all of these qualities. This is precisely why I asked you to step into this role. You are capable of more than you realize, and the foundation benefits from your insight and initiative. Emily exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She understood that this day had tested not only her practical skills but her capacity to remain composed and compassionate in the face of unexpected challenges. The sunlight streaming through the windows highlighted the warmth and energy she had helped cultivate throughout the hall, a tangible reflection of her growing confidence and effectiveness. Looking at David, she saw the faintest glimmer of approval in his eyes, a quiet affirmation that she had met and surpassed the expectations placed before her, setting the stage for continued growth, greater responsibility, and a deepening connection between them built on respect, trust, and the shared commitment to making a meaningful difference in the lives of those they served. Late that afternoon, the shelter was winding down from a busy day, the golden light from the setting sun filtering through the tall windows and casting long, warm shadows across the polished floors. Emily Jackson moved methodically, ensuring that all supplies were stored, tables were wiped clean, and volunteers received their final instructions before leaving. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and quiet pride, knowing that she had navigated another day filled with challenges and unforeseen obstacles. As she gathered the last stack of registration forms, the soft click of the front door drew her attention, and David Carter stepped inside, his presence calm but undeniably authoritative, the subtle weight of expectation in his posture unmistakable. He carried a neatly folded folder under his arm, and his gaze swept the room with that precise attentiveness that Emily had come to recognize as part of his meticulous nature. "Emily," he began, his voice steady and measured, "today you faced a variety of challenges, including unexpected guests and logistical issues that could have disrupted operations. You managed each situation with both efficiency and empathy, maintaining order while ensuring that the people we serve felt supported and valued." Emily set down the forms, her palms still slightly damp from the physical activity of the day. She nodded, meeting his eyes, and replied, "I did my best to anticipate needs and respond quickly to every situation. I am learning that the balance between authority and compassion is crucial in this role." David's faint smile softened his otherwise composed demeanor. "Indeed. There will be moments ahead that test not only your organizational skills but your judgment, patience, and emotional intelligence. Leadership is demonstrated in the choices you make when pressure is highest, and today you proved that you are capable of making those decisions with clarity and integrity." He extended the folder toward her, and Emily opened it to find detailed notes on upcoming projects, including plans for larger fundraising events, community outreach initiatives, and the integration of new volunteers into the shelter's operations. Each page carried both the responsibility and the opportunity to make meaningful change. "These are the next steps," David continued, "and while the assignments are demanding, they are also a reflection of the trust one have in your ability to succeed. Your approach today has not only ensured the smooth functioning of the shelter but has demonstrated that you are ready to assume greater responsibility within our organization." Emily felt a deep sense of validation and resolve, the nervous apprehension she had carried on her first day now replaced by a quiet confidence in her own judgment and abilities. She realized that each challenge she faced, each problem she solved, and each interaction she navigated was preparing her for the larger responsibilities ahead. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights mixed with the fading daylight, creating an atmosphere of calm reflection and accomplishment. Emily glanced toward David, reading in his expression a subtle acknowledgement of her progress and a quiet encouragement to continue embracing the role she had been entrusted with. She understood now that her growth was intertwined with the success of the shelter and the foundation, and that her leadership was as much about fostering trust and compassion as it was about operational skill. As the last rays of sunlight fell across the room, Emily felt a surge of determination, ready to face the challenges of tomorrow with renewed focus, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to making a lasting impact on the lives of those she served. The following evening, the shelter had quieted down completely, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible over the faint creak of chairs and the rustle of leftover supplies being organized. Emily Jackson stood in the center of the main hall, surveying the room with a sense of accomplishment and calm pride. Every table was arranged, every meal properly stored, and every volunteer thanked for their hard work. David Carter approached her slowly, his presence calm yet filled with an unmistakable authority, his tailored navy jacket and crisp white shirt perfectly in place. He extended a small velvet box toward her, and Emily took it with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, a symbol of trust, commitment, and acknowledgement of the journey they had shared over the past days. "Emily," David began, his voice steady but carrying warmth, "through your dedication, empathy, and unwavering commitment, you have proven not only your capability but also your integrity. You have transformed this space, and in doing so, you have inspired those around you." Emily felt her chest tighten as she looked into his eyes, recognizing the sincerity and quiet admiration reflected there. "I never expected to find such opportunity, guidance, and partnership in a role I initially thought was simply volunteer work," she said softly, her voice tinged with awe. David smiled faintly and continued, "What began as a simple engagement to manage the shelter and lead projects has grown into a true partnership. I hope you will accept this as a symbol not only of appreciation but also of the trust and collaboration I hope to continue with you, both professionally and personally." Emily exhaled slowly, a wave of emotion washing over her as the weight of the past weeks and the challenges they had overcome together settled in. She nodded, her eyes glistening with quiet happiness. "I accept," she whispered, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy threading through her words. The air in the shelter seemed lighter, warmer, filled with the lingering energy of meaningful work and mutual respect. Outside, the last light of the setting sun reflected off the wet streets, casting long, golden reflections across the hall's polished floors, a gentle reminder that their work would continue beyond these walls. David reached for her hand, and together they walked slowly through the hall, reviewing the space, the volunteers, and the systems Emily had helped to refine. The evening carried a sense of closure, accomplishment, and anticipation for the future. Emily understood that her journey had transformed her perspective on leadership, empathy, and the power of collaboration. She also realized that what had begun as a structured, contractual engagement had grown into a genuine connection built on mutual respect, trust, and shared purpose. As they stepped toward the exit, the soft glow of the shelter lights framed their silhouettes, and Emily felt an overwhelming sense of readiness for the challenges, successes, and experiences that lay ahead. This was more than a role, it was the beginning of a partnership, a story of growth, trust, and the realization that dedication and empathy could create profound change, both in a community and in the hearts of those willing to lead with integrity.